Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for daily video number 903. The March to 1000 continues. And today is kind of spun off from yesterday's video. This is another one of those days where I had something else in mind, but then you made noise. So apparently, over the course of the last month or so, 4 or 5 different people all wanted me to answer the exact same question about the RID combiner Rail Racer. Now, it's a popular combiner amongst the fandom because, well, look at him. He's gorgeous. He's one of the best looking combiners Hasbro or Takara have ever done, like bar none. And it's extremely well remembered in the fandom. However, it's a very interesting one to go over because it's not got the best history and it really did not have the best time as a toy. You can see from the title, I've named this video something like, the rough history of Rail Racer or something like that, just to kind of indicate, this toy had a lot going on. There was a whole lot of mess that happened with this particular figure. So we're going to discuss my own thoughts about the toys. We're going to discuss everything that went wrong with them, and then we're going to discuss a possible future. So hopefully I answer everything you ever wanted to know about Mr. JRX from Car Robots that I could possibly answer. So we're just going to get started with just as a quick refresher for everybody, just to kind of get refamiliarized with the group. So for starters, we have their leader, Rail Spike, which in Japan was named J5. Yeah, if you didn't know, in Japan, the naming convention behind these was to just call them J and then add a number to the letter J. So naming wise, they did not have the most exciting names going on. They also had names that weren't the best to remember. Railspike seems to fit a lot better as far as just being a cool train name goes. What I remember the most about some of these is just the voice actors they had for the cartoon, because he had the same voice as what was the elder's name? Like the elder from Digimon. I can't remember his name offhand. But like they reused the VA, and it was always weird to me. Now, balance-wise, this is probably the best of the whole batch. This is a pretty cool figure in and of itself. The proportions are nice, good train vehicle. Worked out well. Rapid Run is J7 in Japan. I remember his VA was, it was the guy who played Agent J in the Men in Black cartoon. That's how I remember. That's like how I started tying these voices together. Figure-wise, it's okay. It breaks away from all the bright white that the other two members have, so not terrible. You start to see proportional issues because these are very slender vehicle modes. There's not a whole lot of room to hide a whole bunch in, so a lot of these it tended to be a little bit weird about that. But then you have J4, which is Midnight Express. And now you see where the proportion issues get really bad. So he had to be the entire lower half of a Rail Racer, which meant use legs. He knows how to use them. Apparently his entire design is in reference to a train component from Brave, from one of the Braves, Dagarn. I think that might not be intentionally true. I have no quotation on that. I have no source where that information came from. I think it's just, 2 trains designed off of real life Japanese trains who just happen to both be legs. We've had similar incidents where we thought, this fire truck was originally designed to be, the unreleased, modern, like updated Rodimus Prime toy. That wasn't true. That never happened. Just coincidence. I kind of chalked this up the same way. That said, I've never liked the name Midnight Express. I hate the name. We'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, you speaking of names. So it's J5, J7, and J4. Number 1, not the most creative names, but number 2, why are they named like Star Wars movies? 4, 5, and 7. Now, it is in reference to their actual model numbers of the trains they are using out of Japan, so okay, we'll give it credit for that. If you're a train enthusiast, then that's fine. But in an but even then, still a weak name. Midnight Express had a few issues with him right from the get-go. For starters, he was originally supposed to look like this. This is how the earliest depictions of him in trade magazines were. Thankfully, they did go over this again. They took a lot of that yellow out, which I think really helped the look of it overall, especially in the head. The head, it looks so cheap. It does look kind of knockoffy to have that much yellow across the head and the face. And it washes out a lot of the nice detail that's in that head sculpt. So he's already dealing with a last-minute deco change, which happens. That happens a lot, especially back then. That's entirely fine. I hate the name Midnight Express. It's too long for a Transformer name. It really is. It doesn't sound right. Now, it was named Midnight Express for most of the English-speaking countries, and even in non-English-speaking countries, mostly just anywhere outside of the U.S., except there is one exception, and that is in Turkey. Why, of all places, was this character not named Midnight Express in Turkey? Because the name Midnight Express is derived from an old movie which depicts an American trapped in a Turkish prison. That country doesn't look fondly on that movie, so his name was Euro Express. That is now 2 last-minute changes this toy had to suffer. Understandable in that one. That's a little bit weird. It's also very weird to me as a pro wrestling fan because I know the real Midnight Express. Thank you very much. Suffice to say, naming-wise, I kind of feel like the naming thing is like, for the individual members, is like 2 for 6. Because I don't like any of the Japanese names, and 2 of the American names are good. Rail Spike and Rapid Run I can go with. Midnight Express, that's not the only naming stuff. We'll get to the other naming stuff later on. For now, we have to discuss deco. So, something that is pretty well known in the fandom, especially back around this time and then in through the 2000s, was Takara just did it better. You know, Hasbro always removed paint apps to make the toys cheaper to produce, and if you wanted the really show accurate ones and the nicely decoed ones, you go with the Japanese release, right? This is an exception to the rule. I think I made a video about how, like, this, you know, where I was talking about toys that were actually better in America than they were in Japan. And we discussed the Rail Racer team there. To give you a visual example, here is J5, the Japanese version of Rail Spike. So I want to point your attention to the shoulders, especially the tips where the peg and socket are for the vehicle mode connection. Realize now, this is all paint. All of this is paint. The inside and the outside are all molded in translucent green and then painted blue on the inside, painted white on the outside, and on the outside, you then got a whole lot of tampografts done and additional spray apps. Takara went ham on the paint. And the only reason they did this was because they wanted the windows to be translucent. So in order to get the passenger windows in vehicle mode translucent, a huge amount of these toys are cast in translucent plastic and then painted over, which results in the inconsistent look that you see here that is frankly pretty ugly. Now, you know me and translucent plastic by now. If you've watched this channel for longer than, I don't know, a week, you've heard me rant about how bad clear plastic is over time. To this toy's credit, I do not remember hearing anything about breakage when it comes to JRX or any of the individual Js. So maybe it's made of sterner stuff. I don't know. What I do remember from back in the day is a lot of people reporting that because of that clear plastic, the connection points for JRX aren't as solid. They're a lot softer than they actually were for the original version of for the American version of the toy. That can be a result of the plastic the translucent plastic being made softer and more flexible. Remember, over time, it gets much harder and more brittle. So that could very well lead to breaks these days. Don't know. Don't have the Japanese one on hand to try out. Wouldn't try it out even if I did. Suffice to say, it produced a pretty ugly paint job, and this is not helped by the fact that there was a lot of inconsistency with the paint apps on these figures in the Japanese versions. Now, if you have the individual releases, that's pretty much fine. They're in windowed packaging. You can tell before you buy, oh, yeah, that's an ugly one. If you bought the gift set, good luck to you, because it's a completely sealed box, no windows. You just take whatever comes out of that box. If the tampografs are crooked, if they are faded, if the spray apps are inconsistent, sorry, can't help you there. So for Takara to actually go through this method, it's a really out there thing for Takara to go through so much effort to paint these figures just for them to end up very poorly done in the first place. So it actually does lead to American versions that actually do look better. Without the translucent plastic, the actual molded color on them is vastly more consistent. And in some weird cases, they actually kind of made the toys a little bit flashier. Railspike here, for instance, has painted metallic gold plastic in metallic gold paint instead of flat yellow. Now, that's not the end. It still gets a little bit more treacherous. There still gets a little bit weird with the Hasbro version, because there is actually a running variant to all of these, because the original releases were kind of like this. But in order to make those windows stand out, there is a running change that has them individually painted in. Now, I love how in the course of about 2 decades, Hasbro has completely flipped on this, where originally they were removing clear plastic from toys in order to do less paint on them, and then just painting the windows. No. Now we move into the modern era, where we have a ton of clear plastic being used very poorly on modern figures, all so that they can have windshields, and then instead of just painting the windows like they did here. Ha ha ha, how the times they are changing. It wasn't just windows and material and paint job that gave Hasbro problems with this particular set. One of the things was, how do you even sell these? So ultimately they came out in the Mega Class price point, but the problem with this is that at the time, Takara was working with a far more flexible price point for their releases, and to an extent they still do today. They pretty much just charge for a range of figures based on whatever is an appropriate price for them. But back then, this is, post Beast Wars and Beast Machines, Hasbro is very much about their rigid pricing structure. So when you looked at the train bots, you had, I guess I should call them the Bullet Train team. So I'm not confusing you with the G1s. But when you look at the Bullet Trains, they're not quite up to like Mega Class size. If you compare them to, say, how much bigger Skybite is, and far more paint-loaded Skybite is as well. And then you also think about things like the 3-packs that were also in the Mega lineup for RID. That's a ton of paint, a ton of parts, a ton of assembly, and even vac metal in the case of the Predacons. There's a lot of budget going into there, and yet they still sold at a $15 price point. So when you start to look at that and realize that the train bots were kind of elevated in the package to make it up to the window, whereas Skybite didn't really need nearly as much, you start to realize just how small they were and how much more simple they were by comparison for the price point. But the only other option would have been to release them as very large deluxes. If there was like a $13 price point, they'd probably have fit in just fine. But at the time, it was $10, $15, and they hit right in the middle, which kind of led to a lot of these kind of feeling underwhelming when you bought them individually. If you bought them for the combiner, you were probably thrilled. But, not a lot were. Especially when you consider at the time, collectors who were kind of liking that style of figure were still a rare thing. Transformers were still vastly for kids, and they still are today. But the problem here is that kids don't care about trains the way Japanese kids care about trains, right? It's not a part of daily life here in America the way it is in Japan, especially a bullet train. We don't have bullet trains in America. That's for countries with efficient rail systems that are actually useful on a day-to-day basis. No, 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 no. So what you have here is a vehicle that most kids are completely unfamiliar with, and thus no one really bought. The point, the truth here is, unless you are Thomas the Tank Engine, you're not a train kids care about in America. Period. End of story. Now, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. The set has great advantages. I think we all agree that Rail Racer is a fantastic combiner. Beautifully articulated, like the best articulation a combiner had to that point. Beautiful combined look with a lot of consistent colors, great proportions. The overall combined package behind these three is fantastic. But it's really only when you have all three together do they really show a strength that kind of makes them worth what they were asking for at the time. But that's still not enough, if you can't get kids behind, like, collectors were a vast minority. Like, the adult collectors who knew what a bullet train was and bought these because they were technically superior is very, very marginal back then. Is to the point where we never saw these reused again. You think about what came afterwards with the Universe line, which was repainting any mold that was lying around. You think about things like the movie lines, where they were like, any mold we have available, just put it out there because everyone wants anything Transformers now. Even throughout that period, you never saw a reissue or repaint of the Bullet Train team. You had every other mold that was specifically produced for car robots got repaints. And even some of the American-produced molds for RID, like the new Spy Changers or the basic class Optimus and Magnus, those eventually found repaints. Even molds that weren't originally for RID eventually came out as Universe repaints somewhere down the line. Not these guys, as much as the fandom loves them. It's because Hasbro's bean counters did not love them, apparently. So this is one of those things that was just common knowledge in the fandom at the time. So it's one of those things that, like, back then, like, there's no official record, there's no video of the panel or anything, but you would have fans who were like on message boards and all that go to BotCon asking reps certain things and asking, are we going to see this again? Are you going to make this character? Whatever. And they just report back to us, and it would just exist as posts on a forum, and it would just circulate in the fandom until it was common knowledge. And one of the common knowledge things about Rail Racer is a Hasbro exec stating the toys performed so badly, they were dead set on never making them again. And considering the limited market they had, considering what they were, and the fact that kids aren't going to care about them, I can kind of understand that. Even a potential BotCon, or I guess OTFCC release planned for 2004 also didn't happen. This is Dominus Tranus. This was the proposed set for 2004, and it would have comprised of three named characters, which were reused names: Astrotrain, Steamliner, and a third that was undecided. It was either going to be Loco, which would have been a GoBot reference, or it would have been Cowcatcher, which would have been a fun name because Cowcatchers are not only impossible to put on a bullet train, there's no need to put on a bullet train. Unless you could show me the Tokyo subway system that is littered with random bovine, there's no need for a Cowcatcher. Also, bullet trains, extremely fast. I think at that point, it is more like a cow masher than it is a cow catcher. Suffice to say, even as a convention exclusive, the perfect place to do them again, they never came out, which is a shame because this Decepticon version looks awesome. Oh, missed opportunity. But I know why everyone starts talking about Rail Racer now. It's because we're all staring at this HasLab going like, look, RID stuff that combines sells to collectors. So how would we do a new Rail Racer? How would we do a new set of bullet trains? Well, for being completely honest here, I think a HasLab is a perfect way of releasing them. Now, character-wise, they are on the minor side of the scale. Compared to past characters we've gotten in HasLab, It's not the leader of a, or it's not the leader of a major, Japanese series. It's not Unicron, certainly, but they are fairly well known around longtime collectors, and they are still an extremely good looking set, and a set that obviously has plenty of room for improvement if they were to do brand new high budgeted versions of them. Do I think we're going to get that? Probably not. I think the team is just going to end up being left to obscurity. I don't anticipate their return just because it's hard to get out of the shadow of like being a complete failure of a release. Even if fans demand it, it's still a huge risk on the Hasbro side of things, even to do as a HasLab, because there are a long line of characters that would probably perform better both at retail and as HasLab items, who would absolutely come first. Your best bet, strangely enough, is if the Japanese Trainbot masterpieces, if those actually do well, and if those have done well for Takara, and those are actually popular enough to continue, your best bet is probably a Masterpiece Gatai release. It'd be super random, but if if Takara sees a market that taps both Transformer collectors as well as train enthusiasts and lets them sell a boatload of combinable toys, that's gonna be your way of doing it. So don't anticipate it very much, but there are options. So maybe Rail Racer sees another day in the light. But for now, I think it just has way too much going against them. And you kind of had that from the start. So there you go. There's a history about the Bullet Train team, covering Japanese history, American history, potential future. Hopefully that satisfies everything. So, thank you very much for watching, as always. By the way, there's a weird thing where a lot of people are starting to not get notifications, so I'm not one to go like, please hit the bell, but this time I'm going, please hit the bell, because apparently it's the only way to know when I'm posting. Not that you need it, you just show up every day, and so do I. And thus the grind continues. So as always, I will see you next time.